Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to episode 49 of Faith Practically. I am Darian Claxton, and my guest today is speaker, author, and leadership consultant Kymone Hinds. How are you doing today, Kymone?
And I'm doing great, Darian. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Definitely. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing us together. I thank you for keeping the enemy at bay and for your will to be done on this podcast and for those who are watching and listening. We ask these things in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.
So I got to give a behind the scenes view shout out to you for being a ram in the thicket. Normally, I don't know about you, but in ministry, sometimes you get called on to do something in the last second. And I usually don't tell the congregation. I just kind of roll with it. But I want to give you the props because we had a guest and unfortunately he had to cancel the last minute. You and I have been working together on some other projects throughout this week, and you graciously said, hey, I'll jump in. You have the expertise. You have the credentials to fill in. So thank you for coming in the last second. I know that God has a providential blessing, not just for those who are watching, but for you as well. So just want to affirm you for coming in at the last second here.
Thank you.
So for those who have been watching, you know that we have been following the narrative of David and his son Absalom, a very exciting tale and a very sad tale, where we see that Absalom, he's usurped his father's throne. David has fled the scene. He doesn't want to confront his spoiled son, as always his want. David is like, I want to avoid drama at all costs with his son that he loves so much. And he finds out that his friend, his close counselor, Ahithophel, has defected to the side of the rebels, and he's given Absalom wise counsel. He tells Absalom, chase after David right now. I will myself go gather about 12,000 brothers. We will go and kill the king only, and then bring everybody else back. And then so David, when he hears about Ahithophel defecting, he prays this prayer to defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. And then God answers that prayer seemingly immediately, where his other counselor, Hushai, comes and he goes to Absalom and gives him essentially bad counsel, saying, just kind of hold off, gather all your troops from Dan to Beersheba, and then you, Absalom, go yourself into battle, and then we'll take care of him. And so this deliberately foolish advice is what Absalom follows, and it gives David and his men the time to kind of regroup and prepare for this counterattack. So now we are in 2 Samuel chapter 18, and come on, David has shown a very bad pattern of leadership regarding his sons, chiefly Absalom, but we also saw with Amnon, same kind of thing that happened with Bathsheba has unfortunately repeated itself. And I believe he's created this mess because he had a chance to discipline Absalom when he killed Amnon, didn't do it. Had a chance to reach out to him when he left for 3 years, didn't do it. Then Joab coerces David to bring Absalom back, but David's like, I'm not going to see his face for 2 years. And I believe during those 2 years, Absalom's festering and planning about how to take over the throne, right? And so now the people have seen what kind of leadership David has exhibited, and he and his loyal soldiers, they're primed for battle. They're on this path that we're going to see is going to lead to over 20,000 people dying of their countrymen, including Absalom. And as best as we can tell, to this point, no one has really challenged David's leadership. No one has really tried to intervene. And it's not until verse 3 when David's like, I'm going to go and fight with you men, that the people step up and they tell him, you need to stay, you need to have a seat, telling him you're more valuable to us than 10,000 soldiers. Just kind of hang out. We'll take care of it. So the first question I have for you is, when the king or whoever leader has absolute authority, in this case, do you think someone should have tried to steer David in the right direction before things got to this point, whether it was Joab, it could have been the prophets or one of his wives? What do you think?
Absolutely. I think, I think for us in any system where anyone has absolute authority, it's obviously, first of all, that's dangerous, right? What we're seeing here with David is one of the problems where they say, I think there's a statement that says power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, like absolutely corrupts. But I think what's happening here is David has been surrounded by people who want to be in his good graces. They want David's favor. They want David's stamp of approval. They want David to speak well of them. And they don't want to risk David's displeasure by telling him something that he needs to hear. And I think that's a lesson for any leader, that you can't surround yourself with fans. You need to surround yourself with people who are not like enamored with you. You need to surround yourself with people who don't mind telling you the truth about yourself, even if it risks your favor with them or you're looking at them a certain light. They don't mind losing that because the truth and you hearing the truth is more important to them than them just lying to you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting dichotomy where a lot of leaders, unfortunately, want to have yes men and women surrounding them. They want to be patted on the back. They want to be fed their ego with just, oh, you're doing a good job. And then they push back on criticism, which kind of creates that culture or fosters a culture where we're looking for perfection from our leaders. And so next question is the fact that so when the people push back on David and they say you can't die, so we want you to stay home. And David responds favorably, right? He says, okay, whatever you guys want. Now, why do you think that David responded that way? Is it because they flattered him, or do you think he was actually always open to suggestion, from his administration? And this was just the first time somebody really challenged him.
Well, I think it probably is a little bit of both, right? Like, I think the people who work with David know, like, there's some leaders, people know if you are given to flattery, there's some leaders, and you've probably encountered some, seen some, watched, observed some, that the way to sway their decision is to tell them, man, that this is such a good idea. And if you did this, people would say this about you. And just to say, I've been admiring you from a long time, that's the key to their heart. And just as an aside, I almost wonder if some of that, in terms of David's quest for this approval, wanting his ego stroked, etc., is based on just his own dynamics of his growth, right? Like his father and brothers almost forget him out in the field.
Yeah.
So now here is this guy who was forgotten, that's in a power role, and people are fawning over him like, yo, you're the greatest thing. So it obviously is feeding a need that he has that was not met during childhood. And so I think David, yes, he sees some of the light in what they're saying, but I think they understood one of the ways to get to him and to get him to hear you is to use that flattery.
I agree. And it makes me wonder that if that was always the case, why no one tried that before? Why is it only now when literally, the kingdom is about to be at the verge of splitting, several checkpoints passed, somebody could have stepped up and done this. And so I'm wondering, is it practical? Is it practical when you're in a situation, whether like you were a pastor, right? We consider the pastors kind of that, the be all and end all authority, right? And when you have a situation where the pastor may be exhibiting some bad leadership, everyone's like, well, they're kind of looking around expecting somebody else to say something because they're afraid of, going outside the chain of command. Same thing with the work environment. But how practical is it to lead from the backseat, which is the title of our episode? Whether in this scenario, in the workplace, we feel bound to following this hierarchy, but we also feel a moral responsibility to jump in. The success of a project may be at stake. It could be an evangelistic effort that's going to go sideways because of decisions being made by the head leader. Is there effective, respectful way to challenge authority and lead from that position without stepping on toes and offending?
Yeah. The easy answer is yes, right? There is a way. And I guess one of the questions I would have for us is, what is the thing that keeps us back from saying something? I understand that we think it's chain of command. I am being respectful to my leaders. But what is it, not just in that leader, but in me as I guess a follower of God, right? A fellow follower of God, that holds me back from even having a private conversation with that leader? What is the thing that I am afraid of that I won't speak of? And maybe that's something we need to explore, right? Because I think if we're honest, some of the things that we see that we don't say to our leader, when we're in the back seat, right? We'll say it to someone else.
Yeah.
And we'll say it to a few other someone else's, right? Like we'll have conversations. And quite honestly, sometimes we'll even wait for failure to happen and kind of almost say, well, see, Like if
Yeah.
but what we did not do is pursue a conversation with that leader. And I think the false dichotomy is either I confront and see and become disrespectful, or I say nothing. When there is
Mm.
another road, is another lane where you can actually have a conversation, you can confront in love, you can speak one on one, you can share things and still be respectful. And I think that's what I want to challenge people. That sometimes one confront your own what is inside of you, your own baggage that you bring to the
Mhm.
table. It stops you from saying something. If you're going to talk to others, really consider talking to the leader and then being respectful in the way you share your concerns, share the things that you see.
Yeah, and I think what's sad is the fact that we culturally, whether in the SDA church or the Christian faith, we have said, well, the pastor is not to be questioned, right? And so in the back of our minds, maybe we want to go to the pastor and tell him or her, I don't think this was a good idea. I think there was a better way you could have said it, but we have ingrained in our minds traditionally that is off the limits. That's off the table. So I'm wondering what a conversation looks like about changing that culture.
Yes.
And maybe you tell me, maybe it's incumbent on the pastor. First pastor, pastor comes in and they say, hey, I have an open door. Well, I guess a lot of pastors say that, but what is a way to convey genuinely that as a leader, you are willing to accept someone's attempt to correct you and to help you in your leadership?
Yeah, I think, well, of course, honestly saying up front, hey, listen, I am open to suggestions. I'm open to, if you see that I'm going in the wrong direction, saying it. But it's people probably heard some of that before.
Yeah.
I think it even takes it a further step when you actually like acknowledge something as an instance. So, hey, I was actually thinking about doing this, and I'm so thankful to Darian, because Darian talked to me. Darian told me about some of his concerns. We talked, we listened, and I realized I was going the wrong way. And because of his conversation, we made a decision, and this is such a better way. By doing that as a leader, what you show people is, oh, so that's not just lip service.
Yeah.
You are open. If you're open to this person, you'll be more open to me. So I think that's one. Um, I think as a church, we do need to create a culture where people feel open to sharing. Now let's be practical. There may be some person you even doubt, is my advice even, am I right? And I think maybe there's a way to even share it with another leader. Say, okay, you might have the pastor's ear. And then there are some people who have a higher leader's ear. They
Yeah.
may have pastor's ear, they may have your boss's ear, they may have the ear of whoever. And you say, I'm concerned about this, but I'm not sure. Would you mind thinking about this? And if you see light, would you mind sharing with the pastor? I'm not trying to gossip. This is my goal here isn't for you and I have to have a back and forth saying how bad he is or she is, but for us to talk about this. And if you see there is some wisdom here, for you to go share with that person. I think that is a fair thing to do.
That's really great counsel. And I think from a leader standpoint, there is a fear of opening the door to maybe dampening your credibility by saying, wow, I'm admitting that I made a mistake. I'm admitting that I didn't know something. And so now maybe am I going to open the floodgates to where I have everybody coming down my door saying, oh, I didn't like how you said this. Or I don't like how you see what I'm saying? So I think there's a fear on both sides to find the middle ground, as you were illustrating. And I believe David has this same issue because, so David, before the battle, he takes his 3 commanders. He's got his 2 nephews, Joab and Abishai, and he has Ittai, who's come over from the Gittite from Philistia. And in the hearing of all the people, he says, deal gently with the young man Absalom, with my son, for his sake. And this is clearly a decision. He's not making the decision as a leader of Israel, as a king. He is saying, this is me as a father. I'm feeling the weight of my guilt of not having raised this spoiled son as he should. And so I want to get in the mind of his commanders, particularly Joab and Abishai. Now, even though and I mentioned that, David has never been challenged to this point, but Joab and Abishai have not shied away from expressing their opinions to him. And so how do you think they feel hearing this strange order, and how come nobody protests? Considering how amenable David just showed himself. And I think literally can say that he may have opened the door to more when the people gave the suggestion and he listened. Why do you think that nobody said anything in his trusted circle of commanders?
I think, there's some topics that may seem off limits, even for any leader, right? Okay, so David opened the door, he changed. Okay, I was going to do this. He told me this. But I think everyone who was close to David knows this soft spot he has for his sons, and to almost say anything about David's, to go against what he's saying, protect my son, don't hurt him, is to really risk losing the king's favor. Like, that's his heart right there. And I think Joab, even in saying yes, probably had it in his mind. I'm not following this order. But I'm not going to tell him I'm not following this order. Because if I tell him I'm not following this order, he's going to double down, and like, I can't make an excuse at the end. And so you can tell, like, even in the midst of this, even though the door is open, they've made some way, they know there's some issues, there's some things that are off limits for David in terms of discussion, in terms of negotiation. Like, no, don't go there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, so Joab hears this order. We know eventually Joab is about to kill Absalom. I don't know at what point he decided that, but he knew, hearing the order, this makes zero sense. So when you have a team member who answers to someone who has absolute power, absolute authority, they see a potentially catastrophic decision being made by the leader. So how does this person discern whether they should get their objection on the record at the time, or simply purpose in their heart to take care of the matter by themselves, because you don't want to confront the authority, as you said? Like, so it's like, it's easier. What they say, it's easier to apologize and to ask for permission,
to ask forgiveness than to ask permission, right?
Right. So how do you discern? Because sometimes you, unfortunately, have to take things into your own hands, right? So how do you discern the difference between I should tell the leader and give the onus, put the onus on him or her, or you're like, no, my words will mean nothing, let me go ahead and handle it behind the scenes? How do you navigate that decision?
So I will say this. I mean, I think, we're drawing the comparisons between their situation and ours. But I think if you're in a situation where you're being given commands by a leader, and you realize this command is not something I should follow through on, right? You realize this is one I should not follow through on. Secondly, I don't feel comfortable. The environment is not one where I can share that and be heard. Then you're in the wrong place. Like, I really think you should not be under that leader, like that environment. If you realize this is a principle I'm violating, and I don't feel comfortable sharing that, then there is something wrong in that environment for you. Now, I understand Israel, they were living there, but if it's a job situation, if it's a work situation, you may have to consider making a transition if you're in a situation where you're having to swallow, okay, I can't do this, but I'm gonna try to sneak it and do it without her saying something. I'm gonna try to sneak it, see if I can get it past them. That is not a sustainable environment for you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, Angel asked a very interesting question in the chat, which I actually thought about this when I was putting together the open, and I purposely left out the husband and wife dichotomy, even though we accept the husband is the head of the home. But I think it's a little bit different. I want to get your thoughts on this. I think it's a little bit different only because I don't believe that either person is an unquestioned authority, where if one person makes a decision, it is like usurping. Like literally, if Joab doing what he did was usurping the authority of the king, versus I don't see quite as much. But what do you think about, as far as husband and wife go?
Yeah. So this is a very good question, Angel. I think if we understand it best, and we want to use a king analogy for the husband at home, the wife is definitely the queen, right? And so you think, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, in chess, the queen is able to do much more than the king. So
yes,
but I will say the best example is that it's like team leadership for a husband and wife. Now,
right,
even in team leadership, there are going to be disagreements. There are going to be times when there's two people who are co-leading something don't see eye to eye, and that's where there is that level of like mutual submission. Now,
Yeah.
I'll be honest, like I probably was a little more like, yeah, I'm right. You got to follow me. But I've learned through some of the examples that I learn as much from hearing my wife and saying, okay, let me open myself to what you're saying. And I think there are times that she'll have to do she does the same, and we both benefit from that. We both benefit
Right.
from taking a posture of, okay, suppose I'm wrong. And I think that's for
Right.
any leader. Here is like, I think one of the things that we admire in leaders is confidence. This is it. This is right. But one of the things any leader can benefit from is a little bit of self-distrust to say, okay, what if I'm wrong? Let me open myself to listening a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And that's one reason why I didn't include this, because when you talk about the king, like, everyone is kind of subservient. They're bowing down. They're like, yes, yes, sir, no, sir. And that's not how a healthy marriage, in my
Yeah,
opinion, married 11 years, that's
agreed.
that's not how a healthy marriage should be. It should be from a team standpoint. We have a common goal together. And,
Right.
and from a leadership standpoint, you see in the workplace, even in the church environments, you may have a couple of elders, a couple of people who are on a team, and they have a goal. And so I recognize your authority, your expertise may be different from mine, and I'm willing to listen. And I love that you put that out there. Suppose I am wrong. And I believe that person in unquestioned authority, in most cases, they don't have that thought process.
Yeah.
And David, I imagine, might have been thinking that, particularly when it comes to his son. So
Yeah.
here it is. The battle has ensued. David's at home waiting for the report, and David's outnumbered. His men are outnumbered, but they're veterans. They're highly trained, and they take out Absalom's men. I mean, obliterate them. 20,000 of them lose their lives. Absalom's trying to get away on his horse. His hair gets caught in a tree, and one of the soldiers brings Joab word. Like, oh, yeah, I saw Absalom. And Joab is pissed. He's like, yo, why didn't you kill Absalom yourself? You know what I mean? I would have given you rewards. I would have done this and that. And the soldier replies with his unquestioned loyalty to the king's command. He's like, I was there. All of us were there when the king told you and Abishai and Ittai not to hurt this man. And like, so if I were to do it, I already know. You telling me this stuff now about rewarding me and giving me garments and crowns and jewels, I know you would have thrown me under the bus if I took matters into my own hands. So Joab's like, he's incensed. He kills Absalom himself. So do you think the soldier was justified in his decision to be loyal to David's command, even though he might have questioned it? What do you think about that decision?
Yeah, I think that soldier that's principle, right? The principle is, our king said this, and I will not allow myself to be bribed to go against that, right? Like, Joab says, you would have gotten all of this. And he said, none of that stuff is worth to me, like following the command of my king. And I think, okay, if this soldier had in the king's presence said, King, I'm not going to follow that command. And that's a different reality than if I say yes, and then I go out of this room, right? This room where we received, there's a decision that's made, and then I go against that. And I think, and I'm just gonna jump in here. Now, different situation, but I think if you're in a room and a decision is made, even if you don't agree with the decision, if you're a part of that decision-making process outside of that room, you don't go undermine the decision by working against it, speaking against it, or even wishing if things don't work out, you say, I told him that wasn't going to work. I think as leaders, that's not principle, because every person who is following is at some point going to lead. You don't want that when you're a leader.
I love that. Sometimes in our work environments, our church environments, we feel compelled to act for the good of the team. We see problematic decisions, and maybe we talk to somebody. Maybe it's not in gossip. It's just like, I'm really concerned with this new proposal. We have this new client coming in, and this is what the CEO, this is what the CFO has determined. I think it's not going to fail, but I think it's going to fail. But we are overcome by fear. Like, we don't want to lose our position. We don't want to be ratted out, by another team member. and we don't want to have a confrontation with the leader, maybe creating a toxic work environment. You know, matter of fact, in this narrative, we see that the son of Zadok the priest, Ahimaaz, he's fully aware of what happened. Like, so he's seen Joab and his men kill Absalom. He's anxious to get back and tell a report. Joab's kind of pulling him back, saying, don't go. I'll send this Cushite, and then eventually lets him go. And then when Ahimaaz gets to David, and David asks him straight up, is everything well with Absalom? And him is like, I don't know. Like I never understood what he's thinking out of that. I'm thinking maybe he is afraid about David's reaction in the moment, or maybe he is expecting the other brother to say it so he doesn't look like he's the one who's bearing the bad news. Now, so do you think that Ahimaaz and generally us as in that position, do you think those fears are legitimate of either upsetting the leader, upsetting the apple cart, upsetting our environment, and we're like, just to keep the peace, even if I was not in the decision room, like I wasn't in the room, but I'm seeing it now. Do you think it's legitimate to be governed by those concerns, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, it's funny, right? So when we are part of a team, we always have to remind ourselves, what is the goal here? Like, what is the goal of this? I did not join this team, this board, this group to make the leader feel good. Like, that's not my role here. All of us have a shared goal, right? The goal on the business, on the job, is to get more clients, to serve our customers well. If it's a nonprofit, to make a difference. If it's a church, to carry the gospel, to serve people. Now, we can get caught up in like personalities, and I like my leader and I want my leader to invite me over and my leader to say great things about me. But then we lose sight of what the goal is. So if one of my responsibilities is in a group or in private to say to the leader, here's some inconvenient truths, right? Here's some truths that you may not like, but you need to know. But the thing that stops me from saying that is I don't want to hurt the leader's feelings, or I don't want to make the leader feel bad. And I've missed the point of me being a part of that team. It stopped being about the mission, and it started being about the leader. And I think that's what's so challenging for us. That sometimes we can become a part of something for the right reason, but then all of a sudden kind of just like lose like our focus. Okay, why are we here? Why am I on this team? What is my role on this team?
And why do you think that mindset takes place? I mean, I may come into a team saying and thinking all the right things about, I am here to give my expertise, my spiritual gifts, bring them to bear for the good of the team. What does the process look like when that gets converted to, I'm concerned about the leader and not about the team?
I think we all want to be liked. We all want to be liked. And I'm not saying, I don't think anyone should go around saying, I want to be disliked. Okay. So that's not the goal. The goal isn't to be the least popular or least congenial person on a team. But I think that's where it comes from. It stems from, it stops being about mission. I think so often, like if you think about it, Darian, how many teams, groups, churches, whatever, have forgotten what's the mission? Why are we even doing this? And so we become just about personalities. And so it becomes cliques, groups, whatever, instead of, okay, we are all moving in this direction. And as we're moving in this direction, we may realize this strategy isn't the best, even though that was my suggestion. Okay, so we need to adjust. But it's never, we can't forget the mission and why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that is something, it's almost like we state the mission and then we think everyone's got it and we don't have to say it again. But I think over and over, we need to repeat in our groups, in our teams, in our churches, what the mission is. Why are we meeting as this board? Why are we meeting as this committee for this mission? Okay, as we're talking about this, we want to be respectful. We want to show kindness and love. We also want to make sure that we are saying all the things that need to be said so that we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, so let me play the advocate in this Bible scenario. Okay, so let's say that Joab actually has a mindset that he doesn't like the order, but he is going to do it. Like, it's possible that when David told Joab to kill Uriah, or to allow Elijah to be killed. He was like, So it's possible that Joab may have heard the order, thought it was kind of weird, but like, I'm going to do it. But then in the moment, he sees this is an opportunity to get rid of a thorn in the flesh. And I believe Joab's thinking like twice, I helped Absalom get a reconciliation with his father. So I'm feeling guilty about allowing this to happen. And I feel like if I take Absalom back in chains, David's going to have compassion on him. Remember, Absalom had worked to gain the favor of the people. So the people are going to be pressing David like, oh, let Absalom go. And Absalom's probably going to have this great speech asking for forgiveness. And so Joab is in his mind playing out the scenarios. And so if he's taking your advice, he's saying, I'm not here to be liked. I'm not here to glorify the leader. I am here for the mission. The mission is to accomplish, in his mind, what the prophecy said. David is going to be anointed of a king over all of Israel. And that is being challenged now by this brother, right? So is there justification for Joab killing Absalom with that rationale?
It's a good question, right? So the mission is this, and Joab is on a team where it seems like his own leader has lost sight of the mission, right? Mm-hmm. So why is Joab still on that team? That's the question, right? Like, why is Joab still on that team? Now, I think there's a lot of layers to David and Joab's relationship. There's a lot of layers where it's like David almost can't come against Joab because Joab has dirt on David. Right.
Yeah.
And so Joab almost in this situation realizes, you know what? I'm not going to follow his command, but he's not going to do anything to me because I have dirt on him. Like, I know the Uriah story. He can't do anything to me. Here's a question I have. What do you think there's any, and I know you're the one asking the question, do you think there's any selfish motive in Joab killing Absalom?
Definitely. I mean, so when Absalom defects, Amasa becomes the general. Mm-hmm. Like Amasa is also another nephew of David. And I remember what happened with Abner. Like, and I've spouted conspiracy theories in previous episodes that David was somewhat dimly aware of Abner being a threat. When Abner, of course, was Saul's general, he defects when he realizes that Ishbosheth, who was Saul's son, is going to make problems for him. And so he's like, I'm better off going to David with my influence, getting the other 11 tribes to come to him. And Joab is jealous of him. Of course, Abner killed his brother, but he's also seeing if Abner comes back and is able to unite Israel, I might lose my position. Abner has better, he's more of an established general than I am. So I think he could be looking at this and saying, well, you know, if Absalom comes back and he is restored in good favor, Amasa, and we're going to see Amasa actually becomes a general, but his fear was, if I leave him alive, then I might lose my position. Right. You know, if I leave him alive, Absalom's, you know, his influence is going to be so strong that if David gets overthrown, there's no way I'm going to be a part of that narrative. So I believe many times Joab, it seems that he perceives that he wants to help David or he wants to bail him out. But I think there's always an ulterior motive in his mind. What do you think?
I actually 100% agree with it. I don't think Joab is as principled as he is trying to let on. Like, you know, David, I realize that you can't really separate your allegiance to your love for your son from your role as a leader. So let me help you out. I think Joab he does feel threatened. And he does understand David's heart, that David probably wants to restore his son, but and he realizes this may drop me down a little bit in this pecking order. And so I don't think Joab's actions are without ulterior motive. It's not selfish in nature in some way. And I think that's something we always have to be guarded on, right? It's so easy for us to justify our selfishness by some principle, right? Like, oh, well, I did that because, you know, you would not have agreed to listen to me. You know, I've seen that. And I think one of the things we said earlier, if you're on a team and you cannot share how you feel and you feel like you have to go behind the back of your leader, you're on the wrong team. If you can't say what you need to say, or if you feel like I have to be sneaky and go behind his back, then you're on the wrong team.
Yeah. And what a time for Joab to quote unquote grow a conscience. I mean, why didn't he do that with his boy Uriah? I mean, Uriah was one of the mighty men. That order made no sense strategically. You're going to approach a fortified city. The battle's going well. Just stay where you are. I'm going to go to a fortified city or fortified wall and allow Uriah. Just we're going to back up slow. That made zero sense. So if you're going to intervene, intervene there. So now all of a sudden, right, because obviously there was nothing for Joab to benefit from by saving Uriah. But in this situation, in the back of his mind, he's thinking about himself, partly, I imagine. Now, Joab doesn't hold his tongue when David starts crying. David gets the news that Absalom is dead, and he's like, the soldiers are coming back from battle. They're victorious. They're anxious about the welcome they're going to get. But the Bible says the victory turned to mourning because their leader is not welcoming them, not congratulating them. He's holed up in his room and he's just bawling his eyes out. Oh, Absalom, my Absalom, would God that I had died for you. And Joab is like, bump this. Where's it? Where's he at? And he goes to his room and he dresses him down. Now, to his credit, I imagine I see it's him like going into the CEO's office or going to the pastor's study and closing the door. He didn't do it in front of everybody else. Okay. But he said, yo, you have made a disgrace. You have disgraced your people. It seems like you love your enemies and hate your friends. Like if all of us had died and Absalom had lived, you would have been happy. And he's like, you need to go out there and tell your men, congratulations, thank you for your sacrifice. And if you don't, I'm telling you, it's going to be bad for you. Right. And David seems to listen. He goes out and he brushes himself off. But then Joab's fear comes to pass, where Joab gets demoted, and Amasa, as I said, he has defected. He just fought against David's men, and David makes him general in place of Joab. And the Bible never acknowledges that David knew that Joab killed Absalom. I'm sure he knew, but we never see that. We see, matter of fact, when he's on his deathbed and he's telling Solomon all the dirt, take care of this, take care of Shimei, take it, whatever. He mentions Joab killing Abner and killing Amasa, never mentions Absalom. So I don't know, but we can surmise that Joab saying what he said, his dressing down of David, and maybe even the murder was a rationale behind David demoting Joab. And so I'm going to ask you, is there any reasonable justification for David appointing this traitorous, potentially opportunistic Amasa in his place? Or is he just acting out of emotions?
It's so interesting. David is a king. David is a warrior king. David is a musician, a psalmist, and David is a father who's made mistakes. And I think there are a lot of lessons we learn from David. We learn how to be a worshiper, how to be repentant and, say you're wrong when you made a mistake. But the Bible does not hold David up as an example of great fathering, right? That's not, you don't get that from David. David is a father who made the mistake of not dealing with his son when he raped his daughter, not talking to Absalom. You just see all his mistakes. And what's difficult is so many times David the king is threatened by David the father. The mistakes of David the father show up in David's work as king. And I know this is not the question you asked. I'm gonna get to that. It's so easy for us, I think, in leadership to think, I'll be this way in my leadership and I'll be this way in my family relations. And you see it with David, what he has missed doing and taking care of as a husband, as a father, is threatening and is messing up his leadership, right? And so that's just a point I want to make. I believe there's some of that still guilt. And if this guy was connected to Absalom, if I bring him in, there is some sort of I feel some sort of connection to my son who is gone. And I think David doesn't make this decision for much reason other than, well, you were Absalom's friend, even though you were against me. This is what probably I would have done to Absalom. So let me bring you in close. And that you see that this is a father trying to do anything to even have a connection to a son who is gone.
Yeah, I never thought of that. That's a very good perspective. I like that. And it's not in this chapter, but we see, I believe, the next chapter, he sends Amasa out to deal with the rebellion. And Amasa he's delaying. Like it's unclear whether David suspects that Amasa has something to do with it, with the Benjamites or whatever. But he sends Joab. It's like Joab and Ittai and Abishai. We'll just go out and give him support. And of course, Joab goes to him, acts like he's his boy, and kills him like he did with Abner, right? and so again, we see this leading from the back seat where Joab is like, okay, obviously there's ulterior motives. This man is taking my spot, even though it's his cousin. Joab and Amasa are cousins. But he's also like, okay, David has appointed someone who's not capable, who might be working for the other side, who probably would do so if given the opportunity, if he's not doing it now because he did it before. So is there, like, what's the way to handle that situation where David has made these decisions as opposed to taking these brothers and killing them? What would the right way have been?
For Joab, right?
Yeah.
This is such a, again, right? So again, it's so hard to kind of make one-to-one correlations because we're not living in a monarchy. That's not our church. That's not how our job works. But I will say, number one, Joab could have spoken up again. Again, he dresses David down about, here's how you're dealing with this grief. Here's what it's doing to these men. Joab, even though it may seem selfish because he was the one demoted, he should have said to David, okay, David, are you kind of watching the trend of this guy? You may need to be a little bit more vigilant in who you just put in leadership. You may need to be a little bit more careful with the decisions that you are putting under his care. This is not me asking to be given back that same position. This is me saying, I have a perspective that you're missing. I'm seeing a blind spot and I'm sharing that with you. I think that's probably the best way that Joab could have handled it. Joab seems like there are times he's taking matters into his own hands outside of hearing a command from his leader. And I think that's always a little bit dangerous. That's dangerous territory for us.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the Abner situation, Joab actually questions David, seemingly respectfully, because Abner is throwing a feast with all of his men, and then he leaves, and Joab comes back, and David's like, why did you throw him a feast? Like, don't you know what he is doing? And so, again, playing the advocate, we don't see what David's response was. But if David has not listened, Joab in his mind is like, I've told him about Abner. I told him about Absalom, because I know they had conversations about Absalom when he brought him back. Maybe not in this particular situation with the rebellion, but if you're in a situation where you as a subordinate have told a leader, you've told her, this is a bad move. Your opinions are discounted. They're put to the back. Now, I know you've suggested why you're still in that situation, right? But if you have not given your marching orders, I always submit that if you're in a job situation, unless we're talking about a relationship, but if you're in a job situation, you should be praying about what to do, right? So if you pray about, I hate the situation, my opinions are not respected, I feel like I'm being undermined by the authority, and God says, no, I want you to stay in the position, right? Leaving is not an option, right? So what do you do then if your opinions are not being valued by the leader, as opposed to taking matters into your own hands? Like I tell her, and they don't listen. How do you respond to that?
That is the dilemma. So it's because the new thing you just put in is, God says stay. Like you're asked to be there. You're told to be there. Ooh, so again, if you're going to go against what the leader says, you should at least say, that is something I cannot follow through on. So here are my options. It's either you have to find someone else to do this, or I sit this out, but I cannot follow through on this command. Now, that is a very bold statement to make, but it's also an honest statement to make. I don't think you should ever be on a team where the coach is calling a play. You're like, you know what? The coach doesn't know what he's saying. When I get the ball, I'm just going to shoot, right? Like, no, like you can't. You say, coach, you probably want to take me out for this play. This is not where my strength is. I'm not seeing this the same way. But I think to intentionally say, okay, I'm going to hear a command and go against it without voicing it, without, really saying something, that is in of itself just bad leadership. Like you're you're not really helping the situation, I think, if you say yes and go behind their back and do something else.
Yeah, yeah. I love Delia's comment about Joab thinking he was a fixer.
Yeah.
So he's like, and we see this narrative all throughout the Bible. I mean, you think about Jacob and Rebecca, and they have this prophecy, right, that the elder is going to be serving the younger, and it seems like Isaac's about to go against that. He's about to bless Esau, and so they're like, I gotta fix it. I know what God said, but we gotta fix it, right? And I believe with that scenario, had they sat back and allowed things to take course, the same result would have happened, because Isaac got his blessing from God. That's where Hebrews 11 said, by faith he blessed his sons. But we're not willing to do that, right? We're like, God, you have lost control. I need to step in, right?
And that's so interesting you bring that up, right? Because Jacob going against and like, leaders doing the wrong thing. God said this, let me help them out, produces like a lifetime of hurt for him. Like it just leads to a lot of challenges for his life. But look at the end of his life when he is blessing Joseph's sons, right?
Yeah,
and his head, right, is his firstborn. So he's blessing Joseph's sons. And Joseph puts his sons in the way where, okay, this is his right hand. I'm going to put my firstborn here. I'm going to put my secondborn here. And somehow in his blind state, like his father was, he crosses his hands. And Joseph is like, no, you're doing this wrong. He's like, nope, this is the right way. And it's so interesting. Even in all of these narratives with Joab's like, no, this is the wrong decision. I'm going to fix this. This is the wrong decision. I'm going to fix this. Two things. One, just like we say leaders should have self-distrust to say, maybe I'm wrong, even those who are following, we can probably have that distrust to say, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe even if this isn't the best decision, God can still work it. I think that's one of the things. And two, who knows if Joab didn't do things the way he did them, going against what David said, kind of going behind his back, what God would have done to be the ultimate fixer of the situation.
Yeah. I guess we'll never know. And I think, unfortunately, that's what happens with us many times, where there are blessings that we miss out on because we want to take the place of God, of the Holy Spirit, right? So I want to switch in closing to the perspective of the leader. We've been talking mostly about the people in subordination. So a leader whose authority has been questioned, has been usurped, particularly in a hurtful way, like with Absalom and David. Absalom's not coming back, right? So even if you acknowledge, let's say David was like, you know what, I understand why he did what he did. I understand why he killed Abner. I understand all this or whatever. How do you respond in a manner as a leader after you've seen people try to lead from the backseat? You've even heard suggestions that were contrary to yours, and maybe someone else decided to do things. How do you respond in a manner that ensures that your leadership will be respected going forward, instead of enabling more of the same? Now, I'll give an example here in this same chapter 19 of 2 Samuel. Abishai straight up challenges David's decision to accept an apology from Shimei. Now, we saw in the last episode, Shimei was this Benjamite. When David was fleeing from Absalom, he's throwing rocks at him, he's cursing him out, whatever, what have you. And Abishai was like, yo, let me take him out. No one's going to talk about my uncle that way. And David's like, no, I'm going to let the Lord handle it, right? And Abishai backs all the way off. But now Shimei has come to him, and it could be because Shimei realizes, well, I guess Absalom lost, so let me try to ingratiate myself with the ruling power. But he comes back to him and seems to be authentic, saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I did. And Abishai is like, no, why are you, David, going to allow him to get away with cursing you out? And David has to rebuke him. I mean, David's like, you sons of Zeruiah, why are you being my adversaries today? And so I want to talk about establishing or reestablishing a working chain of command when this culture has been tainted by your own bad decisions as a leader, and you start to see people popping up trying to fix your problems.
One of the most difficult things, but probably one of the most necessary things for any leader, is a reset. Right? We know in our electronics, right? Like this thing isn't working, and you just trying stuff, like you just unplug or hold that button down for 3 seconds and let it reset itself. I think sometimes with leaders, we almost think, because I've led this way and I've been doing things wrong, I can't shift back, right? Like I can't say, okay, I'm going to stop and acknowledge here are some mistakes I've made as a leader. Here are
Mm,
some things that I may have led astray. Like, so I didn't make these decisions the right way, and I didn't take counsel from others. And some of you even tried to talk to me, and I didn't listen. I didn't
mm,
create the right environment. And so, what we want to do is we want to change that. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to set up people who are advisors. We're going to set up opportunities for feedback. I think it's good to sometimes stop, say, okay, here are some of the mistakes I've made as a leader. Here's some of the results of that mistake, and here's how we want to function going forward. And I think
mm,
it's hard to do that because we almost feel like when I do that, I'm going to lose the respect, I'm going to lose following. But it actually works in the opposite. People respect leaders who are willing to admit that they didn't have it all together and they made mistakes, and then they say, okay, let's now try this. We're shifting, so we're going to try to shift with our leader.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. And it's easier said than done, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you think about a coach of like a basketball team, right? And they have, I mean, of course, with sports, you have all these Monday morning quarterbacks, and you have the ESPNs of the world, and they're basically questioning every decision you make as a coach. Why you call that timeout? Why they run this play? Why they do whatever have you? And so, even if in the locker room you are being transparent, like I've made some mistakes. We didn't. We entered the season with all these expectations, and now here it is. We're going home without a playoff, even a playoff appearance. Here's what we're going to do next season. Let's say we come back because you never know if you're going to make it back next season.
Right.
But let's say the owner is giving you confidence, a vote of confidence, and you come back next season. But here you're looking in the eyes of your players, and you're trying to do this reset as you've laid out. But you see in their eyes, like, some wounds go very deep. And I guess I want to end on the idea of, as a leader, because you mentioned a subordinate saying, you know what, I'm no longer a right fit for this organization because I cannot go along with the decisions being made. When, as a leader, do you say, you know what, this is a bad situation for me because I'm looking in the eyes and I have
Mhm.
lost them, and there's no amount of resetting that is going to bring it back? What does that look like?
Well, that's a tough one, right? I think like any leader, you kind of you part of it is like you have to have the belief I can God's given me this leadership, I can right this ship, I can lead them in the direction. But I think if you see the mission is suffering,
Mm,
if you can't even get them back to focus on mission, then
mm,
there it may almost be time to change leaders in order to
mm,
get people focused on mission. Because if the people, you've lost their confidence to the point where you can't even get them to refocus on mission, then
mm,
why are you even leading? You're just really
mm,
just holding a position. And I think that's difficult. Now, I tend to be optimistic. I tend to think that with work, with owning it, working through different situations, there's probably more hope in getting people back on board than we think. But there may be situations that you can't. You mentioned that thing about the coach. I want to say that for leaders, I think because of natural breaks, okay, we go into a new year. You do have opportunities at those times to evaluate your leadership and to make to press the reset button, to own things, to say, okay, here's where I realize I was off, so that people realize, okay, he or she made some mistakes, but they're owning it, and they're going to be more open now, so I can follow them.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. Great stuff, man. We could talk about leadership and just this Bible narrative, for hours. But I did want to have you, give a plug for anything. I know I like the shirt that you're wearing. Tell us about the shirt that you're wearing and about your daughter and the things that she's getting into.
Sure. So my wife and I, we have three teenagers, three teens, three high schoolers at the same time. So please pray for us.
Mercy. Yes, sir.
But two of I have a son. My oldest is my son, and he's getting ready to go off to college. And
Mm,
my two girls are both entrepreneurs. So both of them own their own businesses. And I'm wearing one of my daughter's t-shirts. Her business is called Slay It Proud.
mm,
Slay, SLAY, IT Proud. It's a play off of that James Brown song, Say It Loud,
Yes.
Say It Proud, Black and Proud. So hers is SLAY, Slay It Proud. And she teaches and promotes Black history through education and apparel. So that's something I just want to encourage you. Check that out if you have, I mean, really anyone, right? But especially if you have younger people, it's good for them to know history and to understand Black history and its influence and its effect on the world. And then my youngest daughter, she does beauty and bath, beauty, and something else. I'm sorry. And her website
Not beyond.
Bath, beauty, and come on, she's gonna get me when I get off of this, but it's her website is slaybaybeauty.com. Slaybaybeauty.com. Check them out.
Okay, we'll throw the links in the show notes. Let me just ask you, while I have you, what advice do you give to? So, I mean, you're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. What advice do you give to entrepreneur parents in encouraging their children into that kind of lifestyle? I mean, you have a hands-off approach, let them do on their own, or you're cracking the whip. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, no, your role is to see what they are interested in, support that interest, help guide, but then also step back, because more than anything, with a parent, the things that is going to be most valuable for your children are the lessons they learn, not the money they make. It's the lessons they learn. And there's some lessons they learn through you teaching them, some they learn through experience, some they learn even through mistakes. And you have to be willing to use all three of them for them to learn those lessons.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you so much for coming on, giving us your wisdom, again, being that ram in the thicket. Thank you all for watching. Kymone, can you close us out with prayer, please?
Absolutely. God, thank you. Thank you for just allowing us to open your word. As someone said earlier in the chat, we sometimes don't appreciate just how real the Bible is and how relevant it is to the things that we face and the things we encounter in our lives. And so, God, I just thank you for Darian and for this community that he has created, that people are looking at your word and applying it to their lives. I pray for everyone who has been watching and who will watch this. There's something that each of us can take, whether we're like the leader or we're following, whatever it is. May we take it, put it into practice. May we learn for ourselves. It's so easy for us to listen and say, this is for someone else. May we learn, what is it for me? May we put that into practice. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you all for watching, for listening. Next week we're off for Christmas, so Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, be safe, and we will be back by God's grace at the beginning of the year. Take care.